In the year 3285, Earth was no longer the home of proud humanity. The planet had changed. Cities that once touched the skies were now trapped under thick glass domes. The air outside carried a strange silence, broken only by the hum of alien patrols above. The Varkali, a cruel and powerful species, ruled the skies and whispered threats into the ears of every human. They said humanity was weak, too small, too fragile to survive in the galaxy. Children no longer ran freely through the streets. Instead, they peeked nervously from behind walls, listening for the low rumble of Varkali ships overhead. Their laughter had become a memory, replaced by the steady rhythm of fear. Adults moved quickly and quietly, heads bowed under the alien gaze, always careful not to attract attention. In schools, lessons were no longer about history or science. They were about obedience, survival, and the rules of living under occupation. Among the shadows, though, a spark of defiance survived. In the orbit above Earth, aboard the human warship, Haven, Captain Leora Dane refused to bow. She had once been a child just like those peeking from behind walls. She remembered hiding from patrols, feeling the cold hand of fear press against her heart. But now, as she walked across the bridge of the Haven, she carried something stronger than fear: hope. Her crew, a mix of humans who had refused to give up, worked tirelessly around her. Each one had a story of loss, of family taken, or cities destroyed, but none had given in. They were tired, yes, but their eyes burned with determination. Leora had learned long ago that fear could only control someone if they allowed it. Humanity had survived worse, she often reminded her crew. And survival alone was no longer enough. They had to rise, even if only a little at first. Below them, Earth waited, trapped in silence. The domes glimmered under the alien patrol lights, casting shadows that stretched like fingers across empty streets. People lived in fear, but they still dreamed. In their quiet moments, behind closed doors, humans whispered about freedom. They remembered stories of ancient Earth, when humans had walked openly under the sun, when laughter had filled the air, and when courage was measured by what one dared to do, not by how carefully one hid. Captain Leora's thoughts often returned to those memories. She remembered the first human ships that had reached the stars, fragile and small, yet filled with daring hearts. They had traveled into the unknown, not for glory, not for conquest, but because they refused to be afraid. And now, Leora believed, the same courage that had carried humans into the stars could carry them out of fear once more. A soft alarm broke her thoughts. On the bridge, the sensors picked up movement above the atmosphere. Varkali patrols. The ships moved in formation, massive and intimidating, their hulls glinting in the sunlight like shards of black ice. Leora did not flinch. She took a deep breath and addressed her crew. This is the moment we've been waiting for. We will show them we are not afraid. We will show them that fear does not control us. The crew responded with a quiet nod, the kind that carried the weight of centuries of human resilience. They had lost much, but they had not lost their courage. And though the streets of Earth below were silent, the spark of hope had begun to spread. Somewhere, hidden in a small room, a child peeked at the sky and whispered, Maybe we are not alone." For the first time in generations, fear trembled, uncertain. And far above, the Haven prepared to remind the galaxy why humanity could never be silenced. Far beyond Earth, in the shimmering halls of the Varkali High Council, arrogance ruled the galaxy. The council's chambers were made of crystal, stretching high into the alien skies. The Varkali sat upon their thrones, tall and glimmering, their eyes cold and unyielding. They spoke of humanity as a species so small, so insignificant, that it would vanish like dust in the wind. Yet even in their arrogance, something began to stir. A strange signal appeared on their sensors, broken, fragmented, and oddly familiar. It carried human voices, images of Earth, of children hiding behind cracked walls, and of humans standing tall against impossible odds. The signal was faint, almost lost among the vastness of space, yet it carried a force the Varkali could not ignore. Hope. "This is a primitive species," General Vorkal hissed, his voice sharp as crystal. "Hardly worth our attention. But there is something here, something we cannot understand." The council debated, their voices rising and falling, but fear had never been theirs. They had never needed to respect humans. They had never needed to fear them. And yet, this tiny spark, the defiance woven into that signal, shook them in ways they could not admit. Meanwhile, on the Haven, Captain Leora Dane watched the stars stretch into the endless black of space. The ship hummed with quiet energy, carrying not just weapons or supplies but messages of resistance. Every transmission, every beacon they sent out, was a reminder to the galaxy that humanity was alive and ready to fight. Leora often thought about what the Varkali did not see. They saw humans as fragile, weak, and broken, but they could not see the courage that burned quietly inside every human heart. Courage that had survived famine, war, and oppression. Courage that had traveled across the stars, hidden in the whispers of every human child. She remembered the night she had first spoken to her crew about hope. They had been weary, their bodies exhausted from decades of hiding and survival. "We are not the smallest species in the galaxy," she had said softly. "We are the species that refuse to bend. We are the species that has survived every storm. And now, it is time to remind them of who we are." Her words had stirred something deep in them, a memory of humanity's greatest victories, moments when hope had triumphed over despair. For the first time in decades, the crew felt more than fear. They felt the thrill of purpose, the quiet fire of rebellion that could not be extinguished. On Earth, the Varkali remained unaware of the invisible war growing above them. Humans moved quietly in hidden cells, communicating with signals that flickered like whispers through the dark. Every intercepted supply shipment, every disrupted patrol, was a message. Humanity was not gone. Humanity was planning. Humanity was rising, and the galaxy, though still distant, was beginning to notice. Other species, long oppressed and silenced, began to listen. The signal carried hope beyond Earth, into the hidden corners of star systems where fear had reigned for centuries. The spark of defiance was no longer human alone. It was becoming a movement, a quiet rebellion that promised the impossible. In the Varkali chambers, tension grew. Their arrogance wavered. Even as they plotted domination, doubt crept in. How could such a fragile species, one they had written off, reach across the stars to challenge them? How could whispers of hope threaten the mightiest empire they had ever built? Captain Leora knew the answer, though. It was simple. Humans fought not just with weapons, not just with strategy, but with something no alien force could erase. The courage to refuse fear. Above Earth, as the Haven prepared its next move, Leora's voice echoed through the ship. "They may control the skies, the cities, even the stories we are allowed to tell, but they cannot control our hearts. And as long as our hearts beat, hope will never die." And far below, in the quiet shadows of the domed cities, human hearts began to beat a little faster. The whispers of courage had begun to spread, and even in the darkest corners a single thought repeated: "We are not alone. We are not afraid." Deep in orbit above Earth, the human warship Haven drifted like a silent sentinel, carrying not just humans, but the hope of an entire planet. Captain Leora Dane stood on the bridge, her eyes scanning the endless black of space. Every distant star reminded her of what had been lost, and of what could still be saved. The Varkali ruled the skies, but Leora knew one truth no alien could understand. Courage was stronger than fear. In the hidden chambers of the Haven, a relic of ancient human design waited. It had been dormant for centuries, a mystery even to scientists. Called the Heartfire device, it pulsed with a quiet energy, glowing like a small sun. Legend said it could amplify the courage of every human who heard it. Leora ran her hand along its surface, feeling a warmth that reminded her of Earth, of sunlit fields and laughter long silenced. "This is more than a weapon," she whispered to her crew. "It is a reminder. It is the voice of every human who refused to bow. Today, we let the galaxy hear it." Her crew, tired but resolute, worked quickly to activate the device. Sparks of energy danced across the room, and the hum grew louder, almost alive. Slowly, a low, rhythmic pulse spread through the ship, and Leora felt it in her chest, a quiet, insistent heartbeat that matched her own. Every human aboard the Haven felt it too, a surge of courage that made fear seem small, distant, and powerless. Far below, on Earth, something strange began to happen. Humans working in secret cells paused in their tasks, feeling an invisible push, a whisper of defiance that urged them to rise. In classrooms, children straightened, sensing a strength beyond their understanding. In hidden factories and workshops, adults paused and looked toward the sky, their hearts beating in unison with the distant rhythm of the heartfire. For the first time in decades, the streets of Earth felt alive. Though the alien patrols still moved above, the humans below began to act with purpose rather than fear. Small acts, a signal sent, a patrol avoided, a word of courage whispered, began to ripple across the planet. Leora watched it unfold on her monitors, a quiet smile tucking her lips. This was the beginning, but the Varkali did not remain blind for long. Their scanners caught strange energy readings above Earth, faint but growing. Across their fleets, whispers of human defiance spread. Some Varkali officers laughed, dismissing it as minor interference. Others, however, frowned, uneasy. They could feel it in the vibrations of space itself, a force beyond any weapon, beyond any strategy. Something was awakening. Leora knew the first step was the hardest. Humanity had to believe that it could stand tall, even when the weight of fear pressed against their backs. The Heartfire device was a spark, but courage needed fuel, and fuel came from hope, from unity, from the quiet determination of every human who refused to let their species die in silence. She turned to her crew, her voice steady and strong. "Today we remind the galaxy why humanity is not to be feared for its weakness. We are to be respected for our courage. Every heartbeat, every whisper, every act of defiance, they all matter. This is the spark, and sparks become fires." As the device reached its full resonance, a pulse shot across the planet, invisible but impossible to ignore. Humans in hidden rooms, in abandoned streets, in secret forests, felt it. Their fear faltered, their courage rose, and somewhere, deep, within the Varkali fleet's sensors trembled. Something was different, something that could not be measured by weapons or numbers alone. Hope, long buried under the weight of oppression, had begun to grow. Earth, silent for centuries, was about to speak, and humanity, small but unyielding, was ready to remind the galaxy that even in the darkest moments courage could ignite the impossible. Captain Leora gazed out at the stars, the glow of the Heartfire device casting a warm light on her face. "This is just the beginning," she said softly. "The spark has ignited, and nothing can stop what comes next." The Varkali did not wait long. Within hours of detecting the pulse of courage from the Haven, their massive fleets moved like dark clouds over Earth. The sky, once a canvas of stars, was now filled with alien ships, their hulls glinting with a cold, cruel light. From orbit to the cities below, the Varkali's presence was suffocating, a reminder that humanity still lived under the shadow of oppression. On the bridge of the Haven, Captain Leora Dane watched the approaching armada. Her jaw tightened, but her eyes did not waver. "They are coming," she said softly. "And that is exactly what we want them to do." Her crew worked in perfect synchronization. Each station hummed with tension and purpose. Engineers adjusted shields, tacticians plotted intercepts, and communications officers sent coded signals to resistance cells across Earth. Every heartbeat aboard the Haven carried the same message. Humanity would not break, no matter the cost. Below, Earth's cities braced for impact. The domes shivered under the Varkali energy beams, warning lights flashed, and citizens huddled in fear. Yet even in those tense moments, courage found a way. Small human teams in hidden bunkers sabotaged Varkali machinery, sending sparks and explosions across the alien lines. Every act, no matter how small, was a defiance, a message that humanity would not bow quietly. The first strike hit with terrifying precision. Alien energy cannons carved through buildings, leaving craters where communities had once thrived. Dust and smoke filled the air and screams echoed through the streets. But the humans, trained for decades in secret, did not flee. They moved with purpose. They fought back with whatever they had, makeshift weapons, hacked drones, even just clever traps. Every loss was felt deeply, but it did not break their spirit. It only made their resolve stronger. Captain Leora made the decision to take the Haven directly into the heart of the Varkali fleet. Many thought it was madness. A single, human ship against thousands, but she knew better. Victory would not come from sheer firepower alone. It would come from ingenuity, from unpredictability, from a refusal to accept fear as the master of humanity. The Haven dove into the enemy formation like a bolt of silver lightning. Alien ships swerved and fired, but human tactics were clever and unexpected. Missiles were launched with precision, energy shields absorbed devastating hits, and the ship moved with the grace of something living. Every strike sent a clear message across the fleet. Humans were not weak. Humans were not helpless. Humans were a force to be reckoned with. In the streets below, civilians watched the flashes of battle in the sky. For the first time in decades, fear was met with awe. Children pressed their faces against reinforced glass, their eyes wide, and whispered, "They fight. They really fight." And it was true. Against impossible odds, humanity was rising. Against a species that had believed. Them powerless humans were proving the opposite. Even the Varkali began to hesitate. Their confidence, so unshakable for centuries, faltered. They could not understand how one small species, barely noticed for so long, could stand against their might. And as the Haven carved its path through the Armada, the ripple of courage spread, not just across Earth but across the galaxy. Captain Leora stood tall on the bridge, her hand resting lightly on the console. "They want to scare us," she said. "They want us to kneel. But fear is no longer ours to give. Courage. Courage is ours to keep." The Haven surged forward, lights blazing, engines roaring like the heartbeat of Earth itself. Humanity had faced its darkest hour, and in that moment they found a strength they had forgotten existed. They were not alone. They were not afraid. And the battle, though terrifying, had only just begun. The first clash of steel and energy had ended, but the war for humanity's future was far from over. Yet one truth was clear. The species that had been silenced for centuries was speaking now, with fire, with courage, and with the unshakable determination to survive. As the Haven carved its path through the Varkali Armada, a new hope began to stir, not just on Earth but across the galaxy. The pulse of human courage, amplified by the Heartfire device, had reached distant worlds. Long oppressed species, hidden in shadow and fear for centuries, began to listen. The whispers of humanity's defiance ignited something deep within them, a longing for freedom, a yearning to rise against their masters. Captain Leora Dane watched the sensors light up with signals from other species. The first to respond were the Makari, a fleet of nimble starships whose people had lived in hiding for generations. Then came the Shiler, fierce warriors who had been enslaved by the Varkali, and even rogue factions of the Varkali themselves, disillusioned with the cruelty of their leaders. One by one, allies emerged, drawn by the courage they could sense radiating from a single human ship. "This is incredible," whispered Lieutenant Aaron, watching the incoming fleets on the bridge. "They're joining us? Because of us?" Leora nodded, her eyes fixed on the stars. Not because of us alone, she said. Because of what we represent. Humanity has survived every storm. We've refused to bow. And now others see that resistance is possible. Across the galaxy, oppressed species had hidden in fear for centuries. They had whispered among themselves about rebellion, but never dared act. Until now. Humanity had broken the chains of silence, showing the universe that even the smallest spark could become a blazing fire. The combined fleet formed slowly, but with undeniable strength. Human ingenuity guided the plans, coordinating with alien allies who had never dared to dream of freedom. Together, they became more than a collection of ships. They became a living force, united by courage rather than fear. On Earth, people sensed the change in ways they could not fully understand. In secret bunkers and hidden alleys, human resistance, cells received coded signals from distant worlds. Their eyes widened with disbelief. Other species were fighting alongside them. Hope, long buried under oppression, began to bloom in hearts that had learned to only survive. Leora addressed her crew over the ship-wide communication system. "This is more than a battle for Earth," she said. "It is a battle for every..." Voice silenced by fear. "We are not just fighting for ourselves. We are giving courage to the galaxy. Every ship, every species joining us. They are proof that defiance spreads, and defiance is stronger than any weapon." The Allied Armada moved as one, striking Varkali supply lines and communication hubs across multiple star systems. What was meant to be an overwhelming empire suddenly faced chaos, not from numbers alone, but from strategy, courage, and the unity of those who had once been broken. Every Varkali patrol disrupted, every fleet captured or destroyed, sent shockwaves through their command. Even the Varkali generals began to question themselves. Their centuries of dominance had taught them to expect obedience. They had never faced a species that refused to bow, that inspired others to rise, that could turn fear into a weapon against tyranny. Their confidence faltered, and hesitation spread like a virus across the Armada. Back on the Haven, Leora felt the weight of history pressing on her shoulders. Yet she smiled, a small, determined smile. Humanity had sparked a movement. From the shadows of oppression, courage had emerged and grown, reaching distant stars. What had begun as a flicker on Earth had become a galaxy-wide flame. She turned to her crew, her voice firm but filled with warmth. "Remember this moment," she said. "We have not yet won, but we have begun something far greater than ourselves. We have shown the universe that fear can be broken, that courage can unite even the most unlikely allies, and that no empire can silence the voice of hope forever." The fleet surged forward, moving as on, a living force, ready to challenge the mightiest empire the galaxy had ever known. Humanity's defiance had inspired a revolution, and now, for the first time in centuries, the universe trembled, not from fear, but from the courage of a single species and the allies they had awakened. The galaxy had changed. What had begun as a single human spark had grown into a roaring blaze, and now the Varkali, once rulers without question, faced their greatest challenge. Their fleets, vast and terrifying, trembled under the combined might of humanity and its allies. Yet the most dangerous force the Varkali could not measure was not in weapons or shields. It was courage. Captain Leora Dane stood on the bridge of the Haven, watching the Varkali Central Command ship loom ahead. The alien vessel was enormous, black and gleaming like a shard of night. Inside, the Council of Shadows, the rulers who had dictated humanity's fear for centuries, sat unaware of what awaited them. Their arrogance had always been absolute. Until now. "Prepare for final assault," Leora commanded. Her voice was calm, yet every word carried the weight of a promise. Humanity would not be silenced. Today, we remind them why fear cannot rule a free species. The Allied Armada moved in perfect coordination. Humans and alien allies, once strangers, now fought side by side, their courage fused into one unstoppable force. Missiles streaked, Across space, energy beams cut through enemy hulls and the Varkali fleet scrambled in confusion. For centuries, the Varkali had believed no one could oppose them. Today, that belief shattered. In the council chambers, panic spread. Generals who had laughed at human weakness now felt an unfamiliar sensation: dread. Messages from their fleets arrived in chaos. Ships destroyed, communications severed, entire patrols vanished. The Council of Shadows tried to respond with fearsome orders, but their commands were ignored or delayed. Humanity's strategy, unpredictable and daring, had undone centuries of Varkali control. Captain Leora guided the Haven closer to the central command. Every maneuver was precise, every strike deliberate. The ship's pulse, amplified by the Heartfire device, resonated across space, a quiet song of defiance that reached not just humans, but allies across the fleet. Courage, Leora knew, was contagious. And now it swept through every ship, every soldier, every being who had once trembled under Varkali rule. The first breach into the command ship sent shockwaves through the council. Human marines, agile and fearless, moved through the alien corridors, dismantling defenses and disabling control hubs. Leora watched on the bridge, her hands steady on the controls. She remembered the centuries of fear humanity had endured, the silent suffering of her people, and the whispered dreams of freedom. Every action, every strike was for them, for the children hiding under domes, for the families enslaved, for the countless souls told they were too weak to survive. And then, the unthinkable happened. The Council's flagship, once the symbol of absolute power, went silent. Systems shut down, weapons froze, and the Varkali fleets faltered. For the first time in history, the mightiest rulers of the galaxy were paralyzed, not by force but by defiance. In the streets of Earth, people paused as the tremors of victory echoed through sensors and monitors. The domes shook, but no one ran. Children peered up at the sky, wide-eyed, feeling something they had not felt in generations: hope. Families hugged, whispers of courage spread, and a new understanding settled across the planet. Fear no longer ruled them. Humanity was speaking, and the universe was listening. On the bridge, Leora exhaled, a mixture of exhaustion and triumph. "They believed they could silence us," she said quietly. "But they forgot one thing: humanity never stops. We may bend, we may hide, but we never give up. And today we have shown them fear belongs to no one but ourselves." Across the galaxy, the ripple of courage grew. Systems once under oppression now dared to rise. Allies celebrated small victories, inspired by the humans who had stood tall when all seemed lost. And for the first time in centuries, the Varkali knew what it was to tremble, not from threat, but from a force far stronger than fear: unyielding courage. Humanity had not only fought a battle, they had silenced fear itself. And the universe, vast and endless, was forever changed. The galaxy was trembling. The spark of human courage, once small and hidden, had grown into a blaze that threatened the mightiest empire the stars had ever known. The Varkali, who had ruled with absolute control, now faced a force they could not measure. Not in numbers, not in weapons, but in sheer willpower. Humanity had shown that courage could be stronger than fear, and that truth shook their foundations. "Captain." Leora Dane stood on the bridge of the Haven, her eyes fixed on the massive Varkali Central Command ship. It loomed ahead like a black monolith, dark and cold, the symbol of centuries of tyranny. The Council of Shadows, the leaders who had dictated fear across the galaxy, sat within, confident as always. But confidence alone could not withstand the tide of defiance rising against them. "Prepare for final assault," Leora ordered, her voice calm yet firm. Every word carried determination, a promise that humanity would not be silenced. "Today, we remind them that fear belongs to no one but themselves." The Allied armada moved in perfect synchronization. Human and alien ships, once strangers, now acted as one. Energy beams cut through the darkness, missiles streaked like fire, and ships moved with precision born of hope. The Varkali, who had always expected obedience now faced unpredictability, ingenuity, and courage, a combination they had never encountered. Below, Earth's citizens held their breath. The tremors of battle shook the domes, but instead of panic, a quiet determination rose. Humans had seen the impossible before, survived the unimaginable, and now, from hidden bunkers to open streets, they felt the courage of their species reflected in the stars. Small acts of defiance, intercepting patrols, sabotaging supply lines, sending secret messages, spread like wildfire. Humanity was no longer waiting to survive. Humanity was fighting. Inside the Varkali Central Command, panic spread among the Council of Shadows. Generals who had laughed at human weakness now felt unease, a foreign sensation they had never experienced. Reports of fleet losses and disruptions reached them in waves. Their control, absolute for centuries, began to crumble. Commands went unanswered. Ships froze in confusion. Fear, once theirs to wield, slipped through their grasp. Captain Leora guided the Haven toward the heart of the enemy ship. Every maneuver was precise. Every strike calculated. And all the while, the Heartfire device pulsed quietly, its invisible energy sending waves of courage across the galaxy. The Allies felt it in their hearts. Even the Varkali troops who had doubted themselves began to falter under the invisible pressure of human defiance. Boarding teams moved through the corridors of the Varkali flagship, disabling systems and dismantling weapons. Human Marines, trained in tactics honed through decades of hiding and survival, fought with a combination of skill and courage that no alien could predict. Every victory, every controlled strike, was a statement. Humanity would not kneel. Humanity would not vanish. Humanity would be heard. And then, the unthinkable happened. The Council's flagship went silent. Its weapons froze. Its shields collapsed. The Armada faltered. For the first time in history, the mightiest rulers of the galaxy were paralyzed, not by force, but by courage. The invisible tide of defiance had broken the chains of fear, leaving the Varkali exposed and unprepared. On Earth, humans watched in awe. Children pressed their faces against reinforced glass domes. Adults whispered in disbelief. The message was clear. Fear no longer ruled. Humanity had found its voice, and the universe could hear it. On the bridge, Leora exhaled. Her eyes shone with quiet triumph. "They believed they could silence us," she said softly. "But they forgot. Humanity never stops. We bend, we hide, we endure, but we never give up. Today, fear has no master." The ripple of courage spread to distant systems. Allies celebrated victories once thought impossible, and for the first time, the Varkali knew what it was to tremble, not from threats but from the unshakable courage of a species that refused to be silenced. Humanity had not only fought a battle, they had silenced fear itself. The galaxy, vast and endless, would never be the same.